What's happening? Hey, we're going live once again here from Winthrop, Minnesota. It's kind of wintry out there today. So, yeah, no snow yet, but we're supposed to have snow tomorrow. Not looking forward to that at all. Thank you guys for joining me tonight in reading from my new book coming out on Halloween. It's called Pavor Nocturnus. And looking at Amazon, I see that there's probably about 5 other books of the same name. Not as good as mine. I'm going to just say that right now because that's what I do. But anyway, yeah, so there are other books out there called Pavor Nocturnus, which is Latin for night terrors. That was the original title of my book. We read the first chapter last night, and tonight we'll be dealing with chapter 2 and 3. Both of those stories. One was presented to me by a gal I worked with named Pamela, and the other one from a very special friend of mine, my girlfriend Stephanie. And yeah, they're both were a couple of weird prompts that became the stories that they are now. So anyhow, yeah, the book will be available on Amazon on the 31st of this month on Halloween. And yes, I planned it that way. And I'm just doing these readings every night until Halloween. Just to give you guys a preview, or, well, read you the whole book. But at any rate, I hope you do still buy it. I posted last night's reading. Hey, Kyle. I posted last night's reading on YouTube. So if you missed it, you can check it out on my YouTube channel. That's at Bradley Bodeker 70. So you can check that out there. And I almost got called into work tonight, but thanks to the hardworking fellows that I work alongside, they got everything covered. Poor guys. I had the day off today, and spent it with my daughter and son-in-law and my granddaughter. So I would have really hated to have been called out for that. But so thanks to the boys for handling things while I was gone. Another friend of mine, David, can't make it tonight, but he'll be watching later. And my dad and my stepmom are vacationing in California, and they just went through an earthquake. It was a 4.0. So he checked in about 10 to 9 to let me know, and I was like, holy cow. So I'm glad he's okay. I'm glad they're okay. And yeah, let's get into the book, which I have somewhere here. Okay. The first story, well, actually, this is the second story. This is chapter 2. The name of this one is called Armageddon and Syphilis. Again, brought to me by a gal I work with, Pam. And her dream was that there was this Hispanic guy that had her chained up. No, it's not one of those dreams. And she had to choose one of these blue boxes, and the one that she chose in her dream gave her syphilis. So with that, I bring you Armageddon and Syphilis. This is what I made out of that one. And here we go. In 3 seconds. All right. There were far too many shadows moving about the cell, built for one. They writhed across the walls as if they had three-dimensional shape and weight. Pamela Rothstein sat in the only square of light that hardly warmed her within the frigid dampness of her 4x6 cell. Since the beginning of Potentate Bestia de la Luz's rule, the European Union expanded to include war-torn Britannia and the crumbling United States. His capital was set up in the newly formed United Israel-Palestine, and he was slowly taking down any rogue nations that opposed him. NATO had been disbanded, and the United Nations became a peacekeeping force that led the world into a new age of peace and prosperity. Famine was wiped out to only a small fledgling third world nations that were ruled ruthlessly by drug lords and sociopathic dictators. Pam and a group of resistant fighters knew better than to fall for the propaganda being spread by government-run media outlets. They had refused the mandate set forth by Delaluz's government and were successful at holding off a UN convoy from taking over a rural high school that they held as a base in Minnesota. But because of sheer numbers and being outgunned, they fell. She lost many friends in that standoff. Their group was reduced from 119 to 7. She watched her comrades being ripped apart by 50 caliber rounds, cooked by the heat of flamethrowers, and gutted by bayonets. The remnants of her group were shipped off to nearby Mankato for processing. DNA was extracted, and then they were left to starve in a group cell, hoping to turn them on each other. Then they were taken singly into interrogation, where they would be offered food in exchange for information. Many had caved from their group. The re-educated were taken to other camps stationed within old Minneapolis, where they would be brainwashed, and eventually they would be given a chip inserted into their right hands as a form of allegiance to the potentate. Then they were released back into society, where they would be monitored 24/7, 365 days a year. The chip had all their identifiers, as well as banking, health, and GPS information. As for the diehards, like herself, they were shipped off to Canada, to the North American headquarters. There they would be tortured and subjected to painful medical examinations. They used sleep deprivation, waterboarding, starvation, and other cruel methods to try to get them to cave. For those that held out after that, they were brought here, deep within a dungeon buried beneath the potentate capital, nestled in the city of Jerusalem. It is here that Pam and her remaining cohorts would sit agonizing days, weeks, and even months awaiting their fate, to be handed to them by Delaluz himself. Pam was spent. She had held out for 3 months in this prison. She no longer had fingernails. One of her kidneys were harvested. Her jaw had a hairline fracture, and her left eye was swollen shut. But she never let them have the satisfaction of knowing she was in excruciating pain. "Number 365-710, came a voice out of the shadows. "Get up. It's time for another session." "Fuck your session," she spat into the darkness. There was a loud clang and the rumble of metal wheels rolling across a track. Then the clatter of keys turning tumblers inside a thick iron door. There was another clang and the door creaked open, flooding her cell with a sick yellowish light. "Get up, bitch," the male silhouette barked at her, "or I'll cut the tendons in your ankles, and you'll never be able to get up again." She only sat there defiantly. The guard came in and jabbed a high-charge rod with 2 small but effective pins at the end into the surface of her flesh. There wasn't a lot there, since she had first been captured months ago. But it didn't matter. Stinging bolts of electricity sizzled down the rod and into her body, sending needle pain from the entry point all the way through her body. It was like a heavy vibration, and then it turned into searing heat. She clenched her teeth, letting out a small growl, and then collapsed on her side. When she awoke, she was hanging from a metallic rack. Arms were shackled to each beam, and her ankles as well. The rack was leaning slightly forward enough to bring a little blood to just under the surface of her skin. A mouthguard with tiny needles that fastened into her gums was also strapped to her jaw. "Good afternoon, Miss Rothstein," a woman in a white lab coat said to her. Pam only glared at her. "Not feeling talkative today?" The woman chuckled to herself, and Pam only painfully grumbled back, the needles working their way into her gums with the slightest movement of her mouth. Drool mixed with blood dripped from her chin and pooled on the floor of the laboratory. I've never understood the resistance of people like you. The fundamentalists I can see, but not your folk. You have no belief system to cling to, no conviction to stand with. Just this ridiculous independence and feeling of entitlement. Even the fundamentalists eventually became compliant after seeing the good that Potentate Delaluz was doing for the world. They learned that he wasn't an enemy of Jehovah or Allah, that he was actually doing their work. He was bringing his people together, working on the common goal of helping one another. But not people like you. But not people like you. People who use mine and me too many times in the vocabulary. You think you're entitled to have more than everyone else, to keep what is yours. Such a shame. Such selfish attitudes that get you where? Why, right here where you are now. You aren't singing about freedom now, are you? No. It makes me sad to see you like this. It really does. I don't enjoy this part of my job. I would rather be friends than be the person who's supposed to break your spirit, so to speak. But now that you've gotten to this stage, wheeled into my laboratory, time for that is gone. My job now is to prepare you for what is to come. You're going to be a star. Worldwide networks will simulcast your judgment. You'll be a testament to his mercy. We will wheel you out onto the balcony that overlooks the courtyard while millions will watch you. Then you will be offered a mercy. And if you refuse that mercy, then you will be given a choice to pick one out of 3 boxes. No one knows what the boxes contain, and each one is customized so that no one is the same. The woman grabs a remote and activates it. The rack holding Pam shakes to life, making the needles in her mouth tear around in her gums. Blood leaks in sheets from her mouth. Then the rack begins to move down a corridor and into a large freight elevator. Inside there are 6 others hung on the rack, the same as her. Their mouthpieces were absent and painful moans uttered from their mouths. "Listen to them," the woman said. "Listen to them, Miss Rothstein. Their pathetic cries have dwindled to their false hopes. This is the sound of regret, the sound of penance." Pam's rack backs automatically into the empty space between a former combat vet and a grizzled old rabbi. The apparatus on her face begins to rattle, making the pain even worse, and then a sigh of release uttered from her lips as the needles withdrew, and then the mouthpiece falls to the ground. "Enjoy this small moment together. You've all succeeded in nothing. Your salvation awaits above." The woman smiles like a predator and then disappears as the elevator door slides closed. "Where are you from, soldier?" the combat vet asks through a similar bloody mouth. "August Bay, Minnesota," Pam says achingly. "You?" "Originally, Millard, Nebraska. But they picked me up in Butte, Montana. The rabbi here is from Pine City, New Jersey, and Allison, at the end, was picked up in Santa Cruz, California." "What are they going to do to us?" "Well, we'll be publicly executed. Probably in the worst possible way. This Delaluz guy is a fucking psychopath." "Psychopath or not, he's got the entire world behind him." "Not too hard considering the social climate that got us all here." "We believed he was the Moshiach," the rabbi moaned. "He fulfilled all the requirements, and the brethren believed that he was the one, that he would take Palestine out of the promised land and restore our temple. But then he garnered a truce with the Gentiles, and soon the world supported his false peace between our peoples. Then he rebuilt our temple only to use it as his own place of worship." Pam remembered watching all these events on the news She remembers hearing governments across the globe praise the potentate, and it wasn't long until the world leaders gave up the sovereignty of their own countries. The elevator shook and then began to ascend to the levels above. "This is it," the soldier whispered. "Time to embrace the suck." Allison began to cry. "Don't," Pam said to her. "Don't give 'em satisfaction. Keep your tears and trade them for rage." "That's right," the soldier concurred. "Don't give those motherfuckers a show they expect." Allison tried to hold back her tears, and then the elevator came to a stop. There was a hiss, and the doors began to open, letting in sunlight that stung their eyes. One by one, the racks automatically rolled their way out and onto the large patio that was the stage. Bestia, dressed in a white cotton suit below the black slick hair, walked slowly back and forth down the line of prisoners. Cheers roared all around them as fellow citizens shouted for blood. His hair was an oily black that was slicked back and tied into a bun near the top of his head. His skin was tanned and perfect, with no blemishes. A grin, far too wide to be human, stretched from one high cheekbone to the other. A 5 o'clock shadow of beard stubble, trimmed neatly, followed his jawline. "Citizens of the world," Bestia says to his audience, "today we sentence those who would seek to end the peace we enjoy on our planet. Those that would rather have chaos instead of safety, I provide for you. Those that would cut down without a second thought, the soldiers who bring you this peace." His words, spoken with a Latin accent, were so smoothly and so emotionally charged that the audience cried out for more. "How long," he continued, "how long will I have to waste such precious time on quelling the violence these people bring? How long? I waste time, money, food, resources to bring these animals to justice. When will it stop? When you lay dying holding your guts in from a blade," the vet said tiredly but fiercely. "Excuse me? You heard me, you fuck. We won't quit until you..." The potentate pulls a sword from his sheath and plunges it deep into the veteran's guts, slowly inserting it to the hilt. The former soldier only grunts, and blood begins to bubble from his mouth in spurts. The crowd roars their approval. "I apologize, my friends. I was a bit hasty there." Pam thought the potentate did the gut shot on purpose, because he knew her comrade would die slowly. "You are an abomination," the rabbi spat at him. "I am the abomination?" Bestia says with a grin. "Rabbi, you are the abomination. You claim to be a religious man, yet we find you conspiring with these violent, unethical, resistant fighters. You and your media call it conspiring, but I was only keeping them safe, like they did for us from the Nazis. You even desecrate our temple, turning it into this filthy effigy of you. This is the home of God, not for the likes of you." "Me? I'm doing God's work. I'm making the world flesh. What has your synagogue done? Preach hate and the taking of homes and land from your fellow man? Separating yourselves as the chosen ones of God? Your own ignorance is your downfall. I brought the world together." "You are not the Messiah," Bestia laughed. "No, of course you'd say that. Of course you'd disagree with over 4 billion people. Even Time magazine honored me with the title Messiah." The potentate clicked a remote from his pocket. The rack holding the rabbi clicked and whirred so that it stood him straight up in the air. Hands stretched out on either side and his feet shackled together below him. He could see the looks on the crowd's faces, hateful and full of bloodlust. Wasn't there a man, Bestia said, a carpenter, that came to your people, and he claimed to be the Son of God. He performed miracles and taught with sermons better than any other rabbi of the time. Yet, what did your people do to him? Potentate Delaluz pushed another button, and with bullet force 2 steel rods shot through the rabbi's wrists. Ah, yes, Bestia said. I remember. With another press of the button, another steel rod shot through his feet. The rabbi's body was already crawling with adrenaline. He didn't feel the rods yet. It wasn't until the shackles released his hands and ankles, and the entire weight of his body pulled on the rods, that sharp pain shot through his entire nervous system. Crucifixion, Bestia said. You didn't even have the nerve to do it yourselves. No, you got the Italians to do it for you. The potentate pulled his sword from the dying combat veteran and then pierced the side of the rabbi. He felt it rip through the cartilage and puncture his lung. Blood gushed down onto the crowd. Some of them bathed in it. How does it feel, Rabbi? Bestia asked. But the rabbi only cried out, perhaps asking the same question the character of Jesus did. Why have you forsaken me? Allison had been screeching for the past 20 minutes, and only getting louder with every death of her comrades. Potentate Delaluz savored the fear in her screams, relished the panic that was aroused by the hopelessness that emanated from her pores. Ah, Bestia said, licking his lips. Poor Mrs. Allison Davenport. You've finally cracked. I'm sorry, I meant to say, seen things my way. She nodded her head shamefully. Are you prepared to give yourself over to me? I need every word, action, breath, and thought to be in my service. No deviations. You haven't any family after my forces did away with them. So your loyalties as of late have been for the emptiness of this pathetic resistance. Do you truly give me your loyalty, Mrs. Davenport? Yes, Allison said with her head low. Bestia pressed a button on his remote, and her shackles unlocked. She dropped to the ground in a heap, her face nearly atop the potentate's boot. Forgive me, Mrs. Davenport, if I seem a little distrustful. You and this handful of trash have made your way up to this point in time, defying my re-education processes. So how can I be sure that what you say is the truth? Allison paused. Yes, the world is waiting. I pledge my loyalties to you, Potentate Delaluz. Bestia chuckled. I know. My name is a little hard to pronounce with the Yankee tongue. I had to laugh at your government when they bowed down to me. I made them stay on their knees until they were able to pronounce it correctly. Speaking of tongues, how about using yours to wash the blood and dust from the toe of my boot? Allison's trembling hands held Bestia's boot heel. Pam was hoping she was going to pull it up so that the pretentious prick would fall ass over tea kettle over the railing of the patio to his death. But she didn't. She brought her face up to the blemished white leather boot and began to lick the dust and spatters of blood from it. There, Bestia said. You see, just a small gesture like this can bring you a lot of mercy from me. Stand, my dear, please. He helped her up, and she stood on wobbly legs. She was sobbing with ropes of snot hanging from her nose. Here, he handed her a handkerchief from his breast pocket. Do not cry any more. Clean yourself up. You belong to me now. You are safe. She cleaned her face the best she could, and Bestia let her lean against him as he introduced her to the crowd. They all cheered as Allison watched with tear-stained, tired eyes. "Bring the box," Bestia said to one of his aides. Two of his aides brought out a 2-foot by 2-foot box. It was blue, and it pulsed with a faded blue light. The glow of it was painful to look at it. They sat it on a stand in front of Allison. "As you'll know, Allison," Bestia said, "to be a citizen of the world, you must have a chip implanted in your hand. You cannot buy anything or hold a job within our society without it. Our good doctors have already programmed a chip for you, with all of your pertinent information on it. You just need to place your right hand inside this box, and it will implant the chip." Allison looked at the pulsing blue box, and then looked frightfully at Delaluz. "Don't worry," he said. "It is completely painless." Hesitantly, Allison slowly placed her hand near the side of the box that faced her. Bestia slightly grabbed her wrist and guided her hand into the side of the box, which wasn't solid as she had thought. It pulsed that awful light 3 times, and then Allison brought her hand out. Just under the epidermis was a microchip developed by Veracity Technology. Once inserted under the skin, nanotech would link with your DNA, and your information was downloaded into a database housed in Austria. "Painless, no?" Bestia asked. "Yes," she said, dazed. "It's completely pain." At that moment, the chip exploded in her body. Electrical energy danced through her nervous system, making her have slight convulsions. Then, an electrical fire began to ignite within her. She screamed, and then blue flames exploded from her skin. She flailed her limbs all about, which only fed the flames, and she ran extremely close to Pamela's rack. Pamela's eyes got wide. "Oh, fuck," she thought. "Get the fuck away from me, you weak, betraying bitch!" Throughout the rebuilding of the world government, Pamela had grown callous to many horrors. She had witnessed the torture and death of many of her friends and family. She had endured her own torture. Through it all, she was able to keep her cool. But fire had always been her weakness. She had a dread of dying by fire, and here in front of her, her fears were dancing only about inches from her own flesh. She could smell Allison's tissue cooking. Pam was too busy ducking the flailing pyre of a human to notice that Bestia had clicked another button on the remote, and the shackles on her wrist and ankles released her body, and she fell only centimeters away from Allison's corpse. The heat singed the hair on the side of her head. She rolled quickly onto her side and noticed that the potentate's boots had stopped her. "Miss Rothstein," he said with some contempt, "the hardest nut in the jar. I've heard through the grapevine that you haven't budged in your re-education process." "Let's just get this over with," she spat. "You're long-winded and boastful, and I put up with a lot from your crew. Killing me will be a mercy." Bestia laughed. "I see that your reputation has preceded you. I like that. Please, stand up and face me." Her knees snapped as she stood up. She felt slightly lightheaded, and then she gained her bearings. She clenched both her fists a few times to get the blood circulating. "Still got some fight in you," he said through a smile. "Good. The citizens of the world want a good show." "You get your power from worship," Pam said. "I don't worship anything, especially the likes of you. If you're going to kill me, why don't you just get it over with?" "My dear Miss Rothstein, things are not so black and white. The cost of production for all of this, well, is a ridiculous mockery of expense. The people want to be entertained. They want their thirst for the bloody to be quenched. And you, of course, feel you must oblige? None of this is my doing. This is all the will of the people. Mankind started out with primitive bloodlust, and thousands of years later, look where they are. Yet you claim you've brought peace to the world. I have. There are no wars, just the small, pathetic faction of anarchists like yourself. It is you who have used violence against my peacekeeping rule. You reaped what you've sown, so to speak. I promise you this, you pathetic piece of shit. You can kill me any creative way you choose, but I will make sure I take you with me. Oh my, I do not choose. Do you see the blue boxes before you? Set between them were the same glowing blue boxes that were in front of Allison. You will choose, Bestia smiled. You will choose whichever way you perish before the world. A trail of fear sweat dripped from her temples, down her cheek, and followed the curve of her chin and dripped to the ground. One of those damn boxes is fire, she thought to herself. I don't know how she knows how much I fear burning to death, but he knows. I'm going to put my hand in one of those fucking boxes and my blood will ignite, and I'll go in a pillar of fire like that weak bitch over there. Your hesitation tells me you're frightened, Bestia inquired. Could it be the callous Pamela Rothstein is breaking? Why don't you kill me yourself, you fucking coward? I told you, and I've told them out there. I am a man of peace. Pam jammed her hand into the pulsating box. The air inside was cold like a freezer. Then several pinpricks penetrated her skin, and she pulled her hand back on instinct. Despite little rivulets of blood dripping from the needle wounds, her hand was fine. She waited for her skin to catch fire, but it didn't. There was a warm sensation that traveled through her body, but there was no combustion. A smile formed on her face as she checked over her body. It immediately left her lips when she saw the satisfaction on the smile of Potentate Bestia de la Luz. What is that? What was that? She demanded. What the fuck was that? What did you do to me? Again, Bestia says, I did nothing. You chose the box. You chose to put your hand in there. Lumps began to form on her skin that grew into boils, and then popped and began weeping pus and blood. She felt a raging hot fever overcome her. What the fuck is this? In so many words, syphilis. Not your typical strain. My scientists have mutated a few genomes, and it is a fatal dose. Syphilis? Yes. While it is fast-acting, it will make sure that you're aware it is killing you from the inside out. You fucking bastard. Little chunks of flesh began to slough off of her. She could feel a pustule form on her right eyeball. The crowd roared with excitement. It was then, despite her flesh rotting from her body, she remembered her promise. Bestia's back was turned to her for a moment, and he addressed the crowd, absorbing the adoration the world had for him. She took that moment and ran full on at him. It caught him off guard, and they both tumbled over the railing of the patio and down towards the crowd below. She bit into his neck, infecting him with whatever horror was rending her flesh into liquid. What have you done? Bestia screamed at her as they plummeted 226 feet to the ground. As the skin peeled back from her face, she savored the fear in the voice of Delaluz. His veins are already blackening from the bite wound, and his skin is beginning to bubble from infection. And that is the end of Armageddon and Syphilis. And I have been asked if these stories, at the end of each of these stories, if that is it. And the answer to that is no. The very last story, which we'll read on Halloween, and probably the longest one in the book, ties all of these nightmares together. So you'll see how it works out at the end. It was just a little formula that I tried, and hopefully it works, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. And I need to figure out what the heck happened to my microphone here. Anyway, so we will move on to chapter. What are we on? Chapter 3. This one is called Saturday Morning Fever. This was given to me by Stephanie, and her nightmare was that when she was young, she was in the hospital with a fever, and she had these dreams where starfish would crawl out of these pictures and try to eat her. And in one of those dreams, her mom's portrait came to life, and she had the same fang-filled mouth as the starfish. So, yeah, so that's the prompt I was given, and here we have Saturday Morning Fever. All right, then. Oh, a little note. Stephanie did paint the back cover of the book. So there you go. She's a great artist. Little plug there. I am just a little hoarse tonight. So hopefully this works out. Alrighty. Her eyes flicked open despite the crust that builds in a deep sleep. There were mechanical dings and buzzing in the background, and the sterile room she had laid in glowed in its incandescent lighting. The TV whistled with cartoonish whistles and horns as anthropomorphic characters chased one another through a pulsating, living backdrop. "Ah, little Miss Ornstein," the nurse proclaimed. "So good to see you awake. You had us all worried there for a while." The nurse pronounced her WH sounds with a heavy H sound, so it came out a while. It was annoying to Stephanie, and not something her 6-year-old temperament wanted to deal with, on top of a fever that kept her bedridden for the last week. "Where's my mom?" she demanded. "I'll call your mom and let her know you've woken up. She's been terribly worried about you. Your father is in the waiting room getting coffee. I don't think he's left your side all week." Steph's parents were divorced. Her mother had remarried, and her father was a bachelor sharing a lake home with a roommate on Lake Minnetonka. Her dad came into the room carrying a paper cup filled with smoldering coffee. It was the kind of cup that came with a playing card on it. Steph never understood what the playing card meant, but she was happy to see her daddy. "Hiya, Pumpkin," he said with a grateful smile. He set down his coffee and gave her head a light kiss. Her forehead was still wet with sweat. "Hi, Daddy." She had a weak smile. "How's her fever been?" he asked the nurse. "She's been teetering between 104 and 106, the nurse whispers. "We've given her baby aspirin and used cold packs on her, but nothing seems to help." 106? Jesus. She'd get a brain damage at that temperature. "We believe if it doesn't go down in the next 24 hours, we may try ice baths for her." "Have you spoken to her mother yet?" "She called in yesterday." "Okay. Can we have a few minutes?" "Of course. I will fetch her a tray of food." "You hungry, Steffi?" She was. The only thing she had consumed was the liquid lunch they fed her through an IV. "Can I get ice cream?" she asked in her tired little voice. The nurse nodded. "Sure you can," her dad said. "The nurse will grab you some." The nurse smiled and then turned around and headed out. Stephanie's dad pulled the visitor's chair next to his daughter's bed. "How you doing?" he asked her. "I don't feel good," she answered. "I feel sleepy all the time." "Well, that's your body trying to heal, honey." "Well, why can't I heal when I'm awake?" "Your body doesn't rest when you're awake, silly. It can only heal when you're asleep." I don't like being asleep, Daddy. Her face got grim when she said this. She was already pale from being sick, but this new absence of color was fear. He didn't like to see his daughter so scared like this. Why, Steffi? Don't you want to get better? I want to get better, but... Yes? Where's Mommy? Clever kid, he thought, changing direction on me. She's at home, he replied, but she'll be up here in the morning, okay? The typical Stephanie frown, but the fear was still there. Okay, I guess. Honey, why don't you want to fall asleep? Her eyes turned away from him and looked at the white, sterile wall. I don't like it over there. He looked at the spot she was staring at. They were just framed paintings of starfish in a lighthouse hanging on the wall. Over where? He asked, looking back at her. Out in the hall? No, Daddy. Where we all go when we dream. Are you having nightmares, Steffi? They're not nightmares. They're real. Just like it is real over here. If it's just like over here, then why would you be scared? Are you scared over there? It's different over there. Things are meaner over there. Sometimes I don't know if I'm awake over there or if I'm awake over here, so I'm scared in both places. Oh, sweetheart, they sound like nightmares, really. She shook her head. No, Daddy. Even Captain Kangaroo told me that things are real over there just as much as they're real over here. Captain Kangaroo? The guy on the TV? She nodded her head. His heart broke when he saw a tear leak from the corner of her eye. He caught it with his fingertip before it ended up on the hospital pillow. Can I have some of your coffee? She asked. Just a sip, he said, helping her hold the paper cup. It looked big in her little hands. Careful, it's hot. The nurse came back in with a little cup of sherbet and a wooden spoon. Sorry, the nurse said. All out ice cream. The doctor came in, carrying her chart. How's our little patient today? He said, with a smile. Tired, Stephanie said. I bet you are. Your body has been fighting a pretty tough fever. That's what my daddy said. Wise man, your dad. Can you open your mouth for me real wide and say, ah? Stephanie did so. After the doctor checked her tonsils, he placed a thermometer under her tongue. Try not to talk, Stephanie, he orders her. Let's see how that fever's doing, shall we? The thermometer read 106.4 degrees. The doctor sighs and writes his findings in the chart. What's it say? Her dad asks. 106.4, the doctor says grimly. Damn it. Stephanie, how would you like to try something really fun? What is it? Take a bath filled with ice. It's just like a regular bath, but we put ice cubes in there with you. Stephanie thought about it for a moment, thinking that it would be an effective way to stay awake. Okay, she said softly. Sleep was trying desperately to claim her. Her lids were heavy and her eyes felt like they were filled with sand, but she didn't want to end up over there. She gripped her dad's hand. What is it, honey? He asked her, concerned. I'm falling asleep, Daddy, she frantically moaned. Please, don't let me fall asleep. Stephanie, the doctor spoke up, it's imperative that you sleep. Now let your body rest. The best way to fight a fever. Why can't we just do the ice bath now? There just isn't the staff to do it right now. But tomorrow, if your fever is still high, we'll have you in first thing in the morning. Listen to the doctor, Steffi, her dad said. Let's hope you won't need the bath and your fever is gone in the morning. Please, Daddy, she pleaded. Please don't let me fall asleep. I might not come back. Nurse, the doctor tells the nurse. Let's start our patient out with about 3 milligrams of pentobarbital. That should help her rest. No, Daddy, please. Doc, her dad interrupted. Can we talk for a second? Of course. She's been having really bad dreams. I'm not sure if it's the fever that's giving her the dreams or what. But there's something different. Is there something different we could do? As her dad and the doctor spoke, her lids began to close. With each closure, it would take longer for them to open. She fought it for what seemed like an hour, but it was a mere few seconds when sleep finally embraced her. Her eyes popped open. Her dad, the doctor, and the nurse were gone. The TV was still showing a cartoon with gratuitous violence being played out, with a silly horn tooting in the background. I'm here, she thought to herself. This is the other side. You have to get up, Steffi, Captain Kangaroo said from the TV. You need to get up before they come for you. But, she said hopelessly, I can't move. You must use every amount of strength you own and get out of here. You must leave before they come. There were pictures of starfish on the wall of her hospital room. Some were pink, some purple, some were even yellow. The images began to move, slowly writhing from their fixed spot in the picture, and began to slither towards the television. Oh, God, Captain Kangaroo yelled. Run, Steffi! They're here! Cartoon starfish invaded the television, and Stephanie could see that they had mouths unlike any starfish she had ever seen. They were round mouths that were outlined by cracked lips. Rows of needle-like fangs spun inside those puckering mouths. They were attaching themselves to the good captain. He screamed in agony as they bit into him, tearing away his velvet coat and making purchase with his flesh. Stephanie cried out and tried to get off her bed. She could see hundreds of starfish dripping from the photos along the wall, and they were crawling towards her. She was able to sit up and brought one bare foot to the cold linoleum floor. A starfish near her foot opened its arms, and its fangs shimmered in its circular mouth. Just before it bit down on her, she woke up screaming. One leg was out of bed, and her dad was snoring in the chair nearest her. He jumped and stood up, looking dazed at first, and then focused on his daughter. Steffi, he asked, are you okay? What is it? The TV had been shut off. The starfish sat respectively in their frames, hung about the room. The starfish, she said. They were what? They were coming after me. Oh, honey. The doctor said you'd have some wild dreams and even hallucinate with this fever. He kissed her forehead. You're still burning up. Daddy, she said, I don't want to dream anymore. I'm going to get the doctor, kiddo. I'll be right back. She sat gloomily in the dark room. She kept her eyes on the photos of the starfish, darting her eyes back and forth. She used the remote on her bed to turn the overhead lights on, and then clicked on the TV. A black and white cartoon was on. There was something hypnotizing about it. The characters, the vehicles, the plants and trees, everything was bouncing to some unheard drum. She could feel her lids heavy again, and she fought sleep with everything she had. Steffi! It was the voice of Captain Kangaroo again. His clothes were ripped and shredded. Chunks of his flesh had been bitten off by the starfish. Listen to me. You must leave. They want to exist on the other side. On your side. You cannot let this happen. Starfish began to fly through the air and attach themselves to Captain Kangaroo. He tried to scream but was muzzled by a starfish. They pulsated as they began to feed on him. No, she whimpered. Daddy, where are you? The pictures began to wobble on their hooks. She could hear them detaching themselves and slithering down the wall. Daddy, please! The suckers on their arms were slurping and popping as they crawled their way across her bed, towards her bed. Their skins rubbing against each other, making leathery sounds like whispers of 1,000 people. Steffi! It was the voice of Captain Kangaroo. His flesh had been torn away, leaving a partially covered jawbone. "They won't stop. You have to get out of here. They will use you to..." Something cold hit her system, and she screamed. "Steffi!" It was her dad. "Honey, you okay?" She was in a metal tub filled with ice cubes. She had monitors connected to her, measuring her vitals and, most importantly, her temperature, which had spiked at 107. The ice cubes rattled around, echoing off the sides of the galvanized tub. "Take a deep breath," the doctor ordered. "Tip your head back and breathe in." When she finally woke up and the fog cleared, she realized she wasn't breathing. She panicked and then tipped her head back and looked into the giant tubes of fluorescent lights above her. Air rushed into her shocked lungs and she gasped. "Her temp has already fallen. She's at 103 now." "It's going to be okay, honey," her dad said, grabbing her hand. "It's working." She was more relieved to be awake than realizing her body temp was dropping. She looked around the room and there were no pictures of starfish or lighthouses on the walls. Despite the freezing water, she felt relaxed and focused. "Can I go home?" she asked. "Once we take you out of the bath," the doctor said, "and you can maintain a normal temperature, we can release you by late afternoon." "Oh, thank God. Daddy, I had the worst nightmares." He squeezed her hand. "I bet you did. The doctor said that you were probably hallucinating and having fever dreams with such high temps." She looked around the room and saw no sign of the starfish or the half-eaten captain. She sighed again and dunked her head under the ice water and then came back even more awake. The doctor took another temperature reading and smiled. 98.6. "Perfect," he said. "Now let's get you out of there and dried off." She dried off and changed back into her hospital gown. She still felt cold inside her body. She supposed this was a good thing. She stared timidly at the pictures of starfish on the walls and took them down and laid them face forward. The doctor took her temperature an hour later and it hadn't changed. She was able to maintain a constant temperature and the nurse began to fill out her discharge papers. "I get to go home?" she asked. "Yep," her dad smiled. "With you?" "Oh, honey, you know I can't right now. I'll be bringing you home to your mom's." She felt a sharp, icy jab in her heart. "But, Daddy, I want to go home with you." "I would love that more than anything, honey. But your mother is waiting for you, and I can't bring you to where I'm at now. Soon, though, I promise." "Pinky swear?" "Pinky swear." 2 hours later, she was wheeled out to her dad's old Buick. She loved the smell of the inside of it, old leather and a faint hint of cherry pipe tobacco. She was quiet on the way to her mom's. Despite the fact that she had left the hospital, she wasn't looking forward to going home. Her stepfather wasn't a genuinely nice man, and he made it clear that he didn't want anything to do with her. Her mother, an exceptionally beautiful woman, who in essence looked like an older version of Stephanie herself. While she did love her mom dearly, her mother was too wrapped up in her new husband to even care what was going on with her daughter. "Here we are, kiddo," her dad said, parking in the driveway. Stephanie's lips pouted and she sighed again. She saw her mother come out the front door and walk down the steps to her dad's car. "Come on, Stephanie," she said, opening her car door. "Get on up there. You should get some rest." "Anything I need to know?" she asked her ex-husband. "Plenty of rest," her dad answered. "That's about all. Keep monitoring her temperature for the next 12 hours, but she should be out of the woods." "You have been more trouble than you're worth," she said to Stephanie. "Now run on in and get in bed. I'll be up in a bit, and don't disturb Ben." "Okay, Mama," she said, and kissed her dad goodbye. "You could go a little easy on her dad said. "She's been through a lot." "Maybe you could take her to your place," she said sarcastically. "You know I can't do that yet, but I'm working on it." "You're not working fast enough. Ben and I would like some alone time occasionally." "You're a peach." He started the car and drove off. Stephanie had bundled up in her blankets in bed. She still felt a small chill from her ice bath, but she was beginning to warm up. She stared at the pictures on her wall, and there was a giant photo of her mom. Red hair, done in a bob, and a distant smile on thin lips painted a darker red than her hair. Her mother peeked her head into the room. "Comfy?" she asked. "Yes, Mom," Stephanie answered. "Sleep for a little while, and I'll make you some chicken soup when you wake up later, okay?" "Okay." Her mother closed the door, and Stephanie buried her face in the covers, and she found sleep immediately. "Stephanie!" It was her mother's voice. At least, it sounded like her mother's voice, but a little raspier. "Stephanie, come out of those covers." "Mom?" she asked. Maybe it was a stupid question, but the voice only sounded like her mom, but not exactly. "Yes, Stephanie, it's Mom. Now come out of those covers." Stephanie felt safe in the warm darkness of her blankets. She really didn't want to see the face that the voice was coming from. Maybe it was her mother, but it was a cheap imitation. "I'm really tired, Mom." There was a 20-second pause, and then her mother's voice said, "I don't care how tired you are. Come out of those covers right now." Stephanie lowered the covers from her face. She could see the pictures on her wall trembling. They were paintings of starfish, and the subject matter was trying to escape the frames. With the covers all the way off, she looked straight forward from the foot of the bed. Hanging on the wall was a photo of her mom. The heavy wood frame began to thump on the wall behind it. The photo of her mom opened its thin-lipped mouth, and rows of razor-sharp teeth grinned at her. "Let us in," the mother thing yelled. "Let us in, Steffi. We want to come in and play." "Mom!" she screamed. "Mom, please!" "Shh!" it cackled at her. "Don't disturb your stepdaddy, Steffi. You know how he gets." Stephanie noticed that there were pictures of starfish on the wall on either side of her. They were trembling like her mom's portrait and began to pull themselves free of their prison. The leathery sounds and the sucker sounds began to sound in her head, loud and wet. "We're coming to eat you," the mom thing grinned. "We're going to eat you all up. Then we'll be free to eat more." "Mom!" she yelled. "Ben, help me!" "There is no help, little one." Multitudes of starfish began making their way towards her bed. She threw the covers over her head and tried to wake herself up by pinching herself, but it was fruitless, and the blankets began to tear away from her. "No, get away from me!" she screamed at them. "So delicious," Mom Thing slurped. "So helpless and delicious." The covers are torn away from her, and the first few starfish began to attach their pulsating bodies onto her face, shoulders, and forearms. She screams again as she feels their teeth sinking into her flesh. The portrait of her mom made its way towards the bed. "Any minute now, and I'll wake up from this," she thought to herself. "I'll wake up with another fever, and I'll have to go to the doctor again." But she didn't wake up. Not yet. She could feel her flesh beginning to be absorbed by the hellish sea life. "It won't be long now, Steffi." The portrait of her mom was sitting up at the foot of her bed. "We will absorb you, and we'll come out on the other side." "Please," Stephanie pleaded with the horror that was around her. "Please, stop." "Feast on her, my children. Take her slowly, as her pain makes the flesh so much sweeter." She couldn't move anymore. She was covered in starfish, a pulsating, hungry mass of coarse flesh. Her entire face was covered except for her eyes, and she could see the rows of razor-sharp fangs coming from the opening of her mother's portrait, and it was beginning to feed on her. "This is it," she thought to herself. "This is how I go out." Stephanie! It was her mother's voice, but she was hearing it from farther away. Stephanie, goddammit, wake the fuck up! Stephanie tried to talk, but she was no longer in charge. Something else was, and she was just a passenger. Her mother had pulled the covers off of her, and she gasped. What's happened to you? Her mom asked, no one in particular. What is on you? All over Stephanie's body were star-shaped welts, and they looked fresh. Jesus, Stephanie, her mother said. What the hell did you do? That question went unanswered. Her mother stood up and went to grab a thermometer from the bathroom. Behind her, the Stephanie thing smiled maniacally at her with rows of razor-sharp fangs. All right, there we go. I actually read both those chapters in less than an hour. Wow, what the heck? So, anyways, we will be doing this again. We will be doing this again tomorrow night at the same time, 9 o'clock. We will be doing chapters 4 and 5. We got something with werewolves and something with witches tomorrow night. So hope you enjoy it. I'll put in the links. I will also download a copy of this reading to my YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like my YouTube channel. It helps me do a lot more with it. I was going to do this live event on YouTube itself, but I have to have like 500 subscribers in order to do that. It's all a popularity contest on social media, and yeah, as much as I don't want to become that person, in order to sell books and to get the word out there that I'm writing books and frantically want to do it full time, so I don't have to be outside in the cold to deal with telecom stuff. Anyway, please stop by the YouTube page. It's YouTube at Bradley Bodeker 70, and I thank the folks that have already subscribed on there. I think I got like 6 or 7 subscribers now. Slowly making my way to 50 maybe. But yeah. And again, it's not anything. You don't have to give me money or nothing like that. It's just subscribe to it. Let people know that you're following me and watching my stuff. Hey, great to see Jason tonight, and Terry and Kyle. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. Also know Stephanie, I know you're listening tonight while you're working your butt off. Appreciate that always. And thanks everybody. I try to put as many notifications on all my social media, and it's just driving me nuts actually trying to keep up with all of that stuff. I've been using an AI generator to make the covers, the chapter covers for some of the posts that I've been putting up for the book. They're really kind of, AI always generates some really gruesome, eerie stuff, and I thought it was kind of perfect for this book because everything is kind of dream nightmarish like anyway. So, and anyhow, it is 10 o'clock here, and I wanna, hey, thanks for the shout out there. Hey Sheila, good to see you too tonight. Hope you're feeling better. Yeah. So anyway, where was I at? Yeah, I had I had a creature pulling the mic from me earlier. That's what I was doing when I was wrestling around with my mic. That's what that was. So anyhow, yes, we're going to do this again tomorrow night. Chapters 4 and 5. I already have the event up on this page, Beehive Productions, here at Facebook. And hope to see you guys here tomorrow night. I realize it's Saturday, it's a weekend. But it's pretty cold. We're supposed to get snow tomorrow, so and hopefully my parents don't get swallowed up by an earthquake and fall in the ocean. And hope to get to see you guys all here tomorrow night. If not, you can watch these on YouTube later. I know some of you had to work tonight and had other things going on, and that's totally cool. It's on YouTube, so you guys can watch it there. Somebody had suggested that I make you pay to watch these things, and that's a good idea to make money. This is the first time I'm messing with stuff like this. I mean, I know I've done them every year on Halloween night, but it's the first time I kind of launched a book on Facebook Live. So, yeah, just having fun. I'm not writing to make money, although that would be nice if I could eat on what I make off of these books. I just like telling stories, and I love that you guys listen. I love the support I've gotten from all you guys. And it makes me happy to scare you, and it makes me happy to entertain you guys. So thanks again. Have a good night. I am going to peace out. And yeah, enjoy your Friday. Over and out. Hi, Steffi.